Hey, I'm Dan Pantelo. I'm on this year's Forbes 30 under 30 list for marketing and advertising, and I'm here to give you my 3 tips about making businesses flourish in the upcoming Roaring 20s. Never. Retirement is for people who don't like what they do. 20 minutes. When I had to sing a song in front of my family for holiday gifts when I was a kid. This is a Ukrainian tradition. Creative automation. New York City. Jack Dorsey. The movie 21. I cried shortly after college out of sheer frustration when I was trying to pay off a bunch of parking tickets. Not fun. I get out of the city into a rural setting and I read a book. GIF. Marketing gurus starting fake fights with each other to generate attention through drama, especially on Twitter. 2 cups of coffee. Falling asleep with the TV on. Realizing what I cannot control and not worrying about that. Succession. Okay, so right now we are currently going through a once in a decade transformation in the advertising industry, and it's turning everything upside down. So over the past year, you've seen a whole suite of regulatory changes. So like iOS 14, ATT, GDPR, that all essentially make invasive audience targeting something that we can't do anymore. Brands have been relying for the past 10 years, 15 years on invasive audience targeting in order to get their main path to performance, right? Like this is the best performing thing that we could do before. This is why Facebook and Google became the best advertising platforms, because this was the thing that they did best: invasive audience targeting. In a world where marketers can no longer do that, they have to look to alternative paths to performance, right? So we can't do audience hacking anymore. So what can we possibly do now, right? The audiences that we're able to target can't be this specific. They have to be broad now. And so in a world where they're much broader, right, the main area of focus where if we spend our time, we can get the biggest impact on performance is now creative, right? So instead of seeing, instead of like influencing or changing who sees the ad, the best thing we can do for performance now is change what the ad looks like and what it says, because we can no longer tamper as much with who sees it. So now creative has never been more important than it is today. So essentially the future of advertising, especially over the next 5 to 10 years, is going to focus a lot on the power of ad creative and how can we introduce data and automation into the creative process such that we can maximize the impact that the creative process has on performance, because now it's becoming the main lever. So in the next 5 to 10 years, ad creative testing is going to be a do or die thing. Very simply said, if you don't do it and you're not good at it, you're going to fall behind your competition, because, like we just established, ad creative is the main lever for performance over the next 5 to 10 years. in a world where audience targeting is no longer something we can rely on. So specifically with B2B SaaS companies who typically don't pay attention to creative that much, there's this major opportunity for arbitrage with like outsized returns, right? Most B2B SaaS companies don't focus on the influence that their creative has, but most of them run creative in order to acquire customers, right? And so if you look at creative in a world where most of your competitors probably don't, you'll be able to understand the outsized impact this will have on performance well before your competitors do, which gives you an unfair advantage. We see with brands that we work with, like Twilio and Segment and MongoDB, we see like typically over 50% on average performance increase within the first 3 months, just by experimenting with things like background colors and messaging variables, which is really simple to do. And so there's this really kind of like big untapped opportunity for B2B SaaS companies. And the way that you can scale this kind of approach, and if you're a B2B SaaS person, one way in which you can get started is there's several ways. So one is you can hire a performance-minded creative or a creative-minded performance marketer, right? So what does that mean? So typically, we see that creative designers are and marketers are very siloed, right? They exist in two different categories. In one bucket, you have creatives who just make pretty pictures, and in the other bucket, you have marketers who focus on like buying ads and dealing with the analytics. So what needs to happen today is that these two can no longer be siloed. Because of all the changes happening in the industry today, they need to come together and exist under one roof. And the best way to actually have that change happen in your org is by essentially bringing on a talent that can really influence this and build the right team and processes for this. And the best talent you're going to find, and I think some of the most in-demand people in the industry right now, which you should look for, are creatives, like designers, who have experience understanding advertising data and are eager to look at it. And also, on the other hand, performance marketers who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty with ad creative and actually jump into the platforms and experiment and build ad creative on their own. People who specialize in one role but have sympathies for the other and have tangential involvements with it typically tend to really understand how creative testing works and the best ways to implement it. At the end of the day, though, this will require a lot of time, resources, energy, and people to do manually. And that's not something you can get around unless you use a platform like Marpipe to automate this process for you and do the work of a kind of a team of people with just only a few. So yeah. So yeah, so I was named Rising Star in ad tech by Business Insider, and Marpipe was named by Business Insider to the 21 hottest ad tech companies of 2022, where we were featured alongside the way bigger names like Roku, Trade Desk, IAS, and AppLovin. Forbes also named me to their 30 under 30 list in marketing and advertising. Honestly, I had no idea that a lot of this stuff was coming our way. For instance, one morning I just woke up and got texts and calls from my friends where they were congratulating me, and I had no idea what it was for. This wasn't kind of like a planned out campaign or anything. It does feel really nice to wake up and be recognized for what we've built after years of being very heads down. But we are still so far off from what we need to do. We are on a mission to unite marketers and creatives through data and automation. We want to solve the problem of creative testing once and for all. And we want to be the operating system for creative testing that every brand uses. And we are so far off from that mission. We have barely scratched the surface. We're just getting started. Although it's nice to be recognized, we are still very far from actualizing the change that we want to see. So question number 4, tell us about your approach regarding treating ad creatives as a science rather than an art. Okay, so the same way that audience targeting is something that can be mastered by algorithms, I believe ad creative is the same way. So the visual variables that influence humans to do things can be documented and tracked at scale, and you can actually see patterns emerge in this data. And what's interesting about patterns is that they allow you to predict things that will happen in the future. Ultimately, we will soon be able to predict exactly which visual stimuli people want to see and hear in order to perform certain actions. And this is both kind of scary, but also is this sort of power behind creative technology that can truly change the world and the advertising industry as a whole. In a world where we can predict what visual variables people most want to see and hear from your brand, marketers and creatives can have superpowers, and also build and deliver campaigns that are so much more relevant and connect with consumers on such a deeper level. The thing is, we just need to gather the data to enable this kind of thing. And that's exactly what Marpipe is doing. By running all of these creative tests for all these brands, we're actually collecting all of this data that is actually enabling us to identify these patterns in visual preferences for consumers that we can then translate into pattern recognition signal and ultimately predictive signal. Question number 5 was pick your own question. So the question that I'd like to ask myself is, how will marketing teams evolve based on all of the changes happening in the industry? So one of the things that's great about building Marpipe is that we can see something very clearly about the future, which is that the creatives of the future will look a lot more like scientists and like engineers than they will like traditional artists. Today, creatives look like traditional artists. Tomorrow, they will look like engineers and scientists. The reason is because they will be creative. So first off, creatives have more of an influence on performance than ever before, and this is new. So now, because creatives have such an influence on performance, they're going to need to start, they're going to start getting motivated and need to use tools that give them more signal behind what they do that's good for performance and that's bad for performance. Ultimately, in the near future, just like how today performance marketers are paid based on performance, creatives will be paid based on performance in the near future as well, because now they have more of an influence on performance than marketers. And so we'll see, performance related compensation for creatives. Companies and agencies will start rising up to that very, very quickly. This new breed of creatives that care about performance data will need their own next generation of tools and platforms to enable them to do the things that they do. And that's exactly what we're focused on building at Marpipe. We are building the tooling and the infrastructure for creatives that care about performance. Using our platform, they can run all of these experiments that would take them forever to do otherwise, and centralize all of these insights that tell them what they should do more of and what they should do less of. As a result, you could think of Marpipe as like the operating system for creative testing, right? We are this layer of tooling and platform under the creatives that enables them to do all of these new things as it relates to performance. So that's a really kind of exciting new change for marketing teams, which will, I think, forever change the composition of these teams and also the influence that creatives have in an organization.